going to be most of the way towards the back of the Bible. The further you go towards the back of the Bible, some of the smaller the letters seem to become, and sometimes they stick together. I remember that years ago as I was going into the ministry, I was really struggling with finding some of the pages because stuff was sticking. And I had what I thought was a brilliant idea. I decided I would put tabs on my Bible so that I could find everything. Does that sound good? Yeah, it sounded really good to me. I went home, I'm like, hey, I kind of had this revelation. I'm going to put tabs on my Bible. It'll help me find stuff. And my parents just dropped their head and said, oh, son, no preacher should have tabs on his Bible. And after that, I didn't. Thought, you know what, maybe there's some truth in that. So ever since then, if I know that I'm preaching out of one of these smaller books of the Bible, I find it ahead of time so that I'm there. Because when I get nervous or when I'm in front of people, it really seems to stick together. So if you thought you were the only one that occurs to, you are not. And every now and then I find myself thinking I should have tabs, but that conversation comes back. So if you have not found Philippians by now, I don't know how to help you. You go to the table of contents, I guess, and look it up, but it is back there. So we are still in our Easter celebration series. And today our subtitle is that celebration requires discipline. I bet that sounds a bit ridiculous because we don't think that celebration should require discipline. Celebration should be fun. Celebration should just happen. We almost feel like everything should line up, the universe, the stars, everything works great. And when all of that functions and there's no problems in my life, then I can easily celebrate. Right? That's what most of us think. The reality is, rarely does everything work out that well in our life. Where does everything seem to fall into place and everything just be perfect? A complete lack of chaos. And that's the exact reason that celebration requires discipline. Because one of the things that we read throughout the Gospels, Jesus continues to talk to the disciples about joy. And one of my favorite passages actually occurs in John, where Jesus said to the disciples, I have come so that your joy may be complete. It's this idea that as Christians, there should be something good about us that people see that draws us, or draws them to us. And it's this aspect of joy, this aspect of celebration, and it requires discipline. Because left to our own, we seem to go a different direction. We may party, we may do something that's fun, we may have moments where we are happy, but celebration or joy seems to elude us, and we tend to focus on things that are completely different. And so I love that not only Jesus talks about joy throughout the Gospels, Paul talks about it throughout some of his letters, especially as he writes to the church in Philippi, which is where we're at today. In fact, I bet some of you know our reference, Philippians 4 through 9, because it is one of the Bible verses that I really learned as a kid because it was really easy. Philippians 4, rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. I had no problem learning that one. We had that magnet on our fridge. Anybody else ever have that magnet on their fridge? We had that up. I looked at that always. It is one of the verses that I truly remember. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. I love that passage when I'm feeling well. When I am not feeling well, I would cover it up. And I know I'm not the only one that does that. And if I didn't have something over it, I sure wasn't looking at it. Or if I did happen to read it, yeah, right, not at this moment. Well, I think Paul knew what he was talking about. So Philippians 4, picking up with verse 5. After he says, rejoice in the Lord always, I will say it again, rejoice, Paul writes, let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. I love those words, but they sure put some pressure on Paul. Because he's writing to the church in Philippi, a church that he had helped to establish, a church where he knew many of the people well. And if you're going to write the passage and say, rejoice in the Lord always, I will say it again, rejoice. And you've had a life like Paul, and you haven't rejoiced, the church is going to know. We always know when somebody says the words but they don't really mean it. We know when that happens, right? And so Paul is writing to the church in Philippi saying, no matter what happens in your life, no matter how well things are going or how poor things are going, you can always rejoice. Now this is Paul who had been shipwrecked, who had been flogged, who had been imprisoned. Anybody that doesn't sound like a life worth rejoicing over? Anybody want to sign up for that life? No. I don't want to be shipwrecked anywhere. I really don't want to be imprisoned anywhere. I certainly don't want to be beaten. That does not sound like fun. That does not sound like things that we would often equate with a life where rejoicing occurs. And yet Paul writes these words to the church in Philippi saying, rejoice in everything, and I'm telling you, you can do it because I have done it. And so then Paul begins to go through the reasons as to how this is a possibility. And I love that Paul begins to talk about this because celebration is not always our normal mood. It is not always the place that we go. The reason is that many of us are prone to worry. Any worriers here today? Some of you should have raised your hand. I'm going to throw that out there because that just adds a little guilt, because most of you worriers have guilt too, right? So if we've got worry, we've got guilt. One of my least favorite words. It feels like it's a newer word in the context that it's used, but drama. I don't even like that word. Another word that I would have used prior to using drama, but I still think it's applicable, chaos. That constant upheaval. Most of us, that is what we are drawn to. Those are the things that stick in our mind. And for many of us, we could have a really good day, and what sticks out, what we remember from the day, is the one problem. The thing that didn't go well, the coworker conflict, maybe the misunderstanding we had with our spouse, maybe the assignment in school that didn't go the way we thought it would go. We tend to focus on the things that are negative. And there's a huge problem with that. And I'm not in any way saying that we should ignore them. But the problem is that these things, I have decided, are like train wrecks or car wrecks. You don't want to look, but you can't seem to turn away. I will never forget that when I really started driving to Florida for college, I would travel down, and the first time, it was pretty accident-free. But about my second or third trip, there were some major accidents on the interstate. And so you would have I-95 just slowed down for miles. And my poor little car did not have the best air conditioning system. It worked really well when you were going about 65 miles an hour. The windows rolled down. But when you were just sitting there still, it blew hot air. And some of you know and some of you don't, I had the coolest first car ever. It was the Mercury Topaz XR5. That was the sport edition of the basically Ford Tempo, which meant it was a two-door, it was a standard, and it had a small spoiler on the trunk lid. Not that I ever went that fast that you needed a spoiler, but it had it. And so when you're sitting there on I-95 in that hot, scorching sun, wondering why the traffic is slowed down for miles and miles, and then you approach the intersection, your mind starts to wonder what happened, what occurred, what is going on here. And then as you get closer, you see every person doing the same thing as they drive by. And you find yourself doing the same thing. I point that out because I really think that worry, guilt, shame, drama, chaos, they take our gaze just like those things. And we find ourselves focusing on them more and more and more. Because it seems like that as long as this is here, my life is at a standstill. There was nothing else I can do until I am past that moment. Paul had a lot of things that people would be looking at in his life. The times he was imprisoned, the times he was shipwrecked, the times he was beaten, the times he was accused, the times he had to go and stand before Caesar. Everything. People wanted to see what was going to play out. And you better believe that they would have known if he was telling the truth or not when he wrote to them the words, rejoice. Because no news travels like bad news. They would have known. And so this lesson, this idea that the things that we focus on impact the way we see life, it really has some great applications. And it's part of this reason that I come back to celebration requiring discipline. Because if it is easy to look at these things and to become down and worried and burdened, perhaps filled with sorrow, consumed with fear, that seems to be in stark contrast to what Jesus did in our lives. It seems to be in stark contrast to what Jesus said in the Gospel of John, I have come to make your joy complete. It seems like Jesus wants his followers, his disciples, those who claim the name of Christ, to be joyful people. Now, this is not what we have seen in churches for many years, where we have a horrible week, Monday through Saturday. Everything that can go wrong goes wrong. We come into church, we put on our best clothes, we put on our best smile we can manage. And when people say, how are you doing? I'm great. I'm okay. I'm fine. I will tell you, sometimes blessed rubs me the wrong way, just in that same category, when we don't mean it because we have struggled. But as a church, I've got to act like everything's okay. This is not just about acting like it's okay. This is much deeper than that. And I'll tell you the same thing that goes along with that, because that actually comes back in Paul's letter. He says that whenever we're struggling, whenever we're consumed with worry and anxiety, whenever things are going wrong, pray about it and trust God. That is scriptural. But I will tell you, if I am struggling and those are the two answers you give me and then walk away, my mind doesn't go to the best place. Typically, it's a sarcastic response of, I already knew that. You're telling me to pray about it, I got that. That's like, next to Jesus in church, that is the number 2 correct answer. You guys don't know that. 80% of the time in church, you can say Jesus and be right. You cannot be listening. You could be on your phone. You could be daydreaming. You could be thinking about lunch. You're called on it. You answer Jesus, and you could be right. Pretty good chance. The second most correct answer in church is pray about it. I point those out because sometimes those are the answers we give. We have nothing else to say. No idea what else to say. And not that they're bad answers in any way. But when we say them flippantly, when we say them without meaning, they cause harm. They cause damage. We end up feeling as though the person who said it doesn't care. And I'm not saying that that's the way they meant it, but we end up feeling as though they didn't care. Does that make sense? And so when Paul begins to write, let everything in your life be a cause for celebration. And if there's any cause for concern, anything that causes you to worry, take it to prayer, take it to God in prayer and trust God. He says it because he knows it. And then Paul does something that I love even more. He doesn't stop there. He doesn't just say pray about it and move on. He actually takes it a little step further. That is a cool ringer right there. I might be updating mine. I've had it for a while, and every now and then I think about changing it, and I haven't done it.
She's celebrating.
Hey, we are celebrating. It is all good. So Paul just doesn't say ignore it and celebrate anyways. He doesn't just say pray about it and trust God. He goes on a step further and he says a couple things that are really, really good. Number one, he goes, here's the first change that I want you to make. When you are thinking about all of the things that you are worried about, when you are thinking about all of the things that bring you down, all of the problems in your life, I want you to change your mind. And rather than focusing on those and obsessing about the things that produce anxiety, obsessing about the things that bring chaos, obsessing about the things that bring us down and problems, I want you to set your mind on several different things. Set your mind on the things that are true. Set your mind on the things that are noble. Set your mind on the things that are right or just. Set your mind on the things that are pure. Set your mind on the things that are lovely. Set your mind on the things that are admirable. And if there's anything in your life, anything around you that you can see is excellent or praiseworthy, those are the things I want you to think about. Over the years, as we've gone through the spiritual disciplines together several times, I have tried really hard to do meditation. And my understanding of meditation has always been an emptying of the mind, where we remove the stuff that is a problem in our life. The challenge is with some of the ADHD that I have, I see and hear everything. Which is why I always keep this door shut. Because if you're in this room, I know what you're doing. You're close enough, I can see it, I can hear it. I'm not even trying, it happens. And so to clear out my mind is a very difficult thing. And it seems that things seem to just creep back in there and they want to stay. What I have learned over the years is that when I do Christian meditation, I focus more on being filled with Jesus. And it's why we have done that, the faucet with the coffee cup, and I've done that demonstration for you guys. It's been a while, maybe some of you haven't seen it, but basically, if you take a clear mug at home, fill it with coffee, and then turn the water on, eventually it will become pure water. It just flushes all of the coffee out of there. It doesn't matter what you put in there. Well, I guess you put some rocks in there, they're probably not going to flush out. But basically, any kind of food item that you put in there, it will flush out, and what you'll be left with is a clear, pristine glass of water. I have learned that if I do meditation in that route, it works really well. And I think Paul was onto something here. He's saying, don't just say, I'm not going to think about the problem that I have. I'm not going to think about the worries that I have. I'm just going to ignore them and they'll go away. He says, instead of doing that, look for the things that are good. Look for the things that are right. Look for the things that are just. Look for the things that are noble. Look for the things that are praiseworthy. And it does a couple things. Number one, it gives us something positive that we are looking for, and it begins to fill our hearts and minds with something godly. The second, it begins to change our attitude. Because our attitude often reflects what we are looking at. If we are looking at an accident on the road, I bet most of us are thinking, boy, I hope that doesn't happen to me. But if we are looking at good things, if we are looking at things that are positive, that are excellent, that are praiseworthy, our gaze and our attention begins to turn that way, and there is a major shift in our attitude. I can tell you what I've been looking at based upon how I'm acting with others. When I'm getting grumpy and crabby, I've been focused on some stuff that tends to bring me down. When I tend to offer more grace and more love and more care, I have been focusing on such things. Does that make simple? Does that make sense? Does it seem that simple, really? It really is. And so Paul says, instead of focusing on all that stuff, turn your gaze this way. Find all of this stuff that is good. It will fill your mind with something positive. It will change your attitude and help you to get throughout the day. And that's really good advice. That is something that I would do a lot of times in our counseling settings and stuff as I'm working with people. Because I really do believe that that works, and there's a lot of evidence that proves that. But then Paul does something that I can't always do. Paul gives us this amazing phrase in verse 5 that we skipped right over. Did you catch it? Right after he says, rejoice in the Lord always, I will say it again. Then he says, let your gentleness be evident to all. We skip over gentleness sometimes, right? Especially when we're in this mindset. And then it's this 4 little words that we barely pay attention to. The Lord is near. And for Paul, those words were meant in 2 ways. The first way they were met was definitely in an eschatological sense. I don't use a lot of big words, but that means in a coming of Jesus, the second return, the second coming of Jesus, the eschatological experience. If you really enjoy studying end times, that's eschatology. You know, all of those fun, see, I do know them, right? I just don't often use them. But he definitely had the sense of, please understand that you may have these problems, and I know that you're worried, and I know that things are going on, but Jesus is returning. Which means any of the problems that you have right now are temporary problems, even if they seem like a permanent problem. They're temporary because Jesus is coming. And we know that because throughout Paul's letter, Paul really seemed to hold to the eschatological view that Jesus would return within his lifetime. Pretty sure Paul was wrong on that. And say, how can you say Paul was wrong? Because we're still here. Paul had that belief. He was really trying. He really thought that things were getting so bad in his lifetime that Jesus would return that quickly. I don't know when Jesus will return. No one does. And I've always kind of joked, but I think more and more it's true. If anyone tells you they do know, that's probably the day you're safest. No one knows except the Father, what the Scriptures tell us. And so I fully believe in that. I fully trust in that. Just as much as I trust that Jesus will return. And so when Paul says this, he says, I want you to take comfort in knowing that the Lord is near. So that is the one way you can interpret that. And I am certain that there is validity and truth in that. The second, it's a reminder that Jesus is with you. Because when we are struggling, when we are anxious, when we are worried, when our life is filled with chaos, when we have shame and guilt and drama in our life, all these things that bring us down, that seem to just like draw us in, we have this amazing reminder that not only will Jesus come again, but Jesus is with me now. In this moment, we can take comfort and have peace, not just because it'll be okay someday, but because the one who died for my sins and gave his life up for me is with me now. Now, when we start to think about that, and then we begin to set our mind and our gaze on the things that are godly or God-honoring, that's a real recipe for change. This is not ignore it and it goes away. This is if you trust that God will be with you, God will be. And if you look for ways that God is at work in the world, you will see them and you will find a solution to the problem. It does not mean the problem will just go away. It does not mean that you won't have to work through the problem. But it means you'll be able to work through the problem as God is with you. Does that make sense? And if I don't have to go through the problem alone, if I know that someone has been there or that someone will walk with me or someone cares enough to actually listen to what I'm going through, my attitude immediately starts to change. It's when we feel alone and isolated and as if no one really cares that the problems get so overwhelming. And so Paul doesn't outdo the problems of the church at Philippi. He doesn't one-up them. It's no contest of, well, this happened to me and I still rejoice. It's not that. It is, let me tell you how I was able to rejoice when I was at some of my lowest times. Let me tell you how I was able to not lose my joy even when everything seemed like it was falling apart. Do you see why celebration requires discipline? It is so much more than just feeling happy. Not that there's anything wrong with feeling happy. It's so much more than just the universal lighting and us going, oh, that kind of moment. Not that there's anything wrong with that moment, but it's more than that. It is if in this moment, regardless of what's going on, I can have joy, not because of my circumstance, but because I know that God is with me. And that's an amazing reason to rejoice. It's not just simply, I know that's rough. You know, if you and I were talking together, I know that sucks. Pray and trust God. You'll be okay. It's not that. I'm telling you, if you tell that to me, you better run. Because it's the last phrase I want to hear, especially when I'm hurting. And if you notice, I really try not to do that to you. When you're hurting, I try to just not say, well, pray about it. Because I think that most of the time that's a brush off. And we take it that way. And Paul goes so much further than this. So if you look at this and say, I don't know if this is actually right or real, I'd encourage you to try it out. The next time you are going through something, which could be many months, which would be awesome, could be this afternoon, which would not be so awesome, try it out. Do a little test. Maybe focus on it for a while, see how that goes. See how you feel. And say, oh wait, Pastor Jamey talked about this, because Paul wrote about it to the church at Philippi. There was something about rejoicing and looking for godly things. I'll give that a try and see how it works. I will guarantee this method that we're reading about changes us. It helps us to get through it. And the last part that I want you to take away from this is verse 7. We read it that the peace of God which transcends all understanding will be with us always. I love that phrase, especially now. It's a good day. That's a hard phrase on rough days. And anyone who tells you isn't being real. That's a hard phrase when we're having a rough time. But it is this promise that we can stand on. That no matter how bad things get, no matter how big the problem may seem in our life, God will be with us and to bring peace that transcends understanding into our life. It's pretty cool, right? The second part of this verse is even cooler. Because it reads, and God will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Rarely do we tend to think of God in military terms in the positive route. We've all read the Old Testament. We read the horrifying encounters of genocide. And we look at this and say, how could God do that? How could that happen? If you have those questions, we'll talk about it sometime. It's never that simple. I'm going to throw that out for you. But here's a very positive example of God in a military sense working on behalf of you, working on behalf of your life. Because it is God guarding your heart and mind. It is actually this picture of like a walled gate with the door locked. And guess who is standing guard to your heart and mind, which is inside? It's actually God standing guard. It's a really cool picture. It's an amazing picture of God actually being there, not just saying, oh, it'll be okay, and holding your hand from a distance. It's actually God protecting you as you are going through it, saying nothing will get in. Which then means the only damage is really from potentially inside, right? What we choose to do on our own. What we see from Paul here is this amazing recipe to help us walk and have protection on the outside, things to do on the inside that help us get through even the worst experience and to find joy and to even celebrate regardless of what's going on. That's how cool. I love it. And so the discipline of celebration will not be in us until we choose to stop worrying about everything else. At some point, there comes a place where we say, I will worry and follow the road of anxiety. Or I will pray, trust, and celebrate that God will actually be who God says He is. We can look at it and say, well, it's not that simple. Well, at some point, we either go with God or we go without. And we can do that in a lot of different capacities. Worry and anxiety is absolutely one. And I will tell you, I know what it's like to worry on my own. I know what it's like to worry as a Christian. And I would think that somehow that kind of defeats the purpose. And I've even had moments, I'd love to say that there's more, but I've had moments where I chose not to worry and I celebrated, not woohoo, everything's okay, but God, I'm trusting you in this and I'm still going to have joy. Wherever you're at today, make that choice. Make the choice of what you want to do. And at the end of the day, it is your choice. We have an amazing promise that God will be with you, that God will guard your hearts and minds, that God will change our perspective by seeing good and amazing things around us, or that God will let us do what we choose and to focus on the negative. It's up to you what you want. But I promise you that if you ask God to help you celebrate in the midst of this, God will do it. Doesn't mean everything goes away. Doesn't mean everything's perfect. But you will find reason for joy in the midst of the problems. And so this week, I want you to practice the discipline of celebration. No matter what happens, are you all with me? You're like, I'm not sure now because you said no matter what happens. No matter what happens, somebody's like, I'm going to reserve judgment until Saturday, then we'll see. No matter what happens, you have the choice to be joyful and to celebrate this week. Not because of the circumstance, but because of the one who is with you. Let's pray. Dear God, we just thank you for this time together. God, we thank you that we really can trust in you. God, we thank you that you'll be with us regardless of the circumstance, regardless of what we're experiencing. And God, we thank you that even on our worst days, we could find something great and godly and righteous and holy to see. God, help us to see you and to see your work each and every day. God, may our minds be more focused on you than any negative thing that we could possibly see. And God, when we have those moments of doubt, reassure us. Renew and refresh your presence in our life. Remind us just how much you love us. And God, through everything, we'll do our best to give you the praise and the glory. Amen.